He betrayed by his wife, and in tears, he suddenly saw his ex-wife playing with triplets in the rain. "Hi, my most beautiful, precious, and beloved family. How are you today? This is your Mr. Peter, and from the deepest part of my heart, I want you to know how much I love you. You are not just a community, you are my heart, my joy, my strength. Every single one of you is a light in my life. Your love lifts me, your support carries me, and your presence means the world to me. I treasure you more than words can ever express. A more loving and beautiful prayer for you. May your heart be cradled in pure love and your soul kissed by peace each day. May every moment bring you closer to joy and every breath remind you how deeply you are cherished. I pray your life overflows with gentle blessings, your pain melts into healing, and your dreams rise like the morning sun. May you be surrounded by kindness, lifted by grace, and wrapped in the warm arms of divine protection. You are not alone, you are loved beyond words, and your light will never fade. Thank you, my precious family, for always being there. Your love gives me strength. Can we reach 1,000 likes on this video, my beautiful family? Let's show the world how powerful love truly is. Please like, comment, and share, because together we are unstoppable. Let's begin with love, faith, and the warmest embrace ever. My beautiful family. Declan Rice stood at the bedroom window, watching the amber glow of sunset paint their spacious penthouse in gold. Behind him, Angie slept peacefully, her dark hair spilling across silk pillows, her breath soft in the quiet room. His eyes traced the gentle curve of her bare shoulder, the sheet draped low across her back. Even after 5 years of marriage, the sight of her still made his heart race. Last night had been perfect. Her lips on his neck, whispered promises between heated breaths, fingers intertwined as they moved together in that familiar dance that never grew old. Angie had a way of making him feel both invincible and utterly vulnerable, a contradiction that defined their love. He moved back to the bed, carefully sliding beneath the sheets. Angie stirred, instinctively curling into his warmth, her body, binding his like a magnet. "Morning," she murmured, eyes still closed, a smile playing on her lips. "What time is it?" "Early yet," he whispered, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Go back to sleep." Instead, she stretched against him, her body awakening with deliberate movements that sent heat coursing through him. 5 years, and still her touch set him ablaze. "I had that dream again," she said, her voice dropping to that intimate tone reserved only for him. "The one with the children playing in our garden." Declan's body tensed slightly, though he fought to hide it. Children, the shadow that had slowly crept over their otherwise perfect marriage. 3 of them this time, she continued, fingers tracing patterns on his chest. "A little girl with your eyes, and 2 boys who couldn't sit still. They were beautiful, Declan." He caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. "Someday," he promised, though the word felt hollow after years of disappointment. Later that morning, as sunshine streamed through their kitchen windows, Angie sat at the island counter, staring at the calendar on her phone. Declan noticed the familiar look, counting days, tracking cycles, the mathematics of hope that governed their lives. "The appointment is at 2, she reminded him, not looking up. "Dr. Mercer said she'll have all the test results today." Declan nodded, setting a cup of coffee before her. "I'll pick you up at 1:30. When their hands touched during the exchange, electricity sparked between them, that inexplicable chemistry that had drawn them together from the first moment they met at a charity gala 6 years ago. He had crossed a crowded room just to ask her name, unable to resist the magnetic pull of her smile. In the sterile white office of Dr. Mercer's fertility clinic, that same hand clutched his with desperate strength. Angie's knuckles had gone white, her breathing shallow as they waited for the doctor to return with the results of months of testing. When the door finally opened, Declan knew immediately. Something in the doctor's carefully composed expression, the slight downturn of her mouth. Bad news had a particular look. "Mr. and Mrs. Rice," Dr. Mercer began, taking the seat across from them. "I've reviewed all your results thoroughly." She shuffled papers unnecessarily, a delaying tactic that only heightened the tension crackling in the room. "Mrs. Rice shows significant reproductive issues that complicate conception," she continued. "The damage to your fallopian tubes combined with the hormonal imbalances we've detected makes natural conception highly unlikely." Declan felt Angie's hand go limp in his. He tightened his grip, refusing to let her slip away from him, physically or emotionally. "What about IVF?" he asked, the words coming out more sharply than intended. Dr. Mercer's expression softened slightly. "Given Mrs. Rice's specific conditions, IVF presents challenges too. The success rate would be under 15%, and that's optimistic." 15% isn't zero, Angie interjected, her voice surprisingly steady despite the tears gathering. In her eyes, "We could still try." "Of course," the doctor agreed. "Many couples in your situation do attempt multiple rounds. However, I believe in being transparent about the probabilities." The drive home passed in silence, the air in the car heavy with unspoken thoughts. Angie stared out the window, one hand pressed against the glass as if reaching for something beyond. Her grasp. Declan's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his mind racing with calculations, costs of treatments, success rates, alternatives. "We could consider adoption," he finally said, breaking the silence as they entered their penthouse. Angie's back stiffened. They'd had this conversation before, ending in tears and slammed doors. "That's not what you want," she said quietly. "You've made that perfectly clear." "I want us to be happy again," he insisted, reaching for her, but she stepped away. "You want the Rice family name to continue?" she corrected him. "You want your father's approval. You want biological children." The truth of her words stung. The Rice legacy weighed heavily on him. 5 generations of success, of sons following fathers into the family empire. His father's disappointment whenever the subject of grandchildren arose had become a physical pressure on Declan's chest. "I want you," he said, though even to his own ears the words lacked conviction. That night, as moonlight spilled across their bed, desperation fueled their passion. Angie came to him with tears already streaming down her face, her kiss tasting of salt and sorrow. They made love with an intensity that bordered on pain, clinging to each other as if they could force the universe to bend to their will through sheer determination. "I love you," she gasped against his mouth, her body arching beneath his. "No matter what happens, remember that I've loved you more than anything." Something in her words felt like goodbye, but Declan pushed the thought away, losing himself in the perfect synchrony of their bodies, in the familiar curves and planes that had become his home. Afterward, holding her trembling body against his chest, Declan stared at the ceiling, unspoken thoughts circling like vultures. The Rice family needed an heir. His father's health was declining, his expectations growing more pronounced with each hospital visit. The weight of 5 generations pressed down on Declan's shoulders, crushing the love that had once seemed indestructible. "We'll figure it out," he whispered into Angie's hair, but she had already fallen asleep, tear tracks still damp on her cheeks. In the morning, when she stepped out of the shower, eyes red-rimmed from crying, Declan made his decision. The words came out mechanically, as if spoken by someone else. "I think we should consider divorce." The towel slipped from Angie's fingers, pooling at her feet. For a moment she looked as if he'd physically struck her, her naked body, the one he'd worshipped countless nights, tensed visibly. "If that's what you want," she said, voice hollow, eyes suddenly distant. "It's not about what I want. The sudden anger in his voice surprised even him. "It's about what's best for both of us. You deserve someone who can be happy with the life you can give, and I need someone who can give you children," she finished, expression frighteningly calm as she stepped toward him. Her bare skin brushed his clothed body, that familiar electricity still crackling between them despite his cruel words. "I understand, Declan. I've always understood what truly matters. To you." 3 weeks later, sitting in his lawyer's austere office, Declan watched Angie sign away 5 years of marriage with a steady hand. She'd lost weight, her cheekbones more pronounced, but carried herself with new determination. When their fingers brushed during the exchange of documents, the familiar electricity sparked one last time, a cruel reminder of what they were losing. "I wish you happiness, Declan," she said formally, standing to leave, the final papers signed. He reached for her hand, unable to let go quite yet. "Angie, Don't," she interrupted, gently extracting her fingers from his. "Please don't make this harder than it already is." As the door closed behind her, Declan remained seated, staring at the signature that ended their marriage. Outside, rain began to fall, mirroring the tears he couldn't allow himself to shed. He had made the right choice for his family, for his legacy. So why did it feel like he had just made the greatest mistake of his life? Chapter 2, Wounded Hearts and Hasty Vows. 1 month after signing the divorce papers, Declan stood at the edge of the Rosewood Hotel's grand ballroom, champagne flute untouched in his hand. The annual charity gala that had once been his and Angie's favorite event now felt like an elaborate form of torture. Every corner held memories, the spot where they'd first danced, the balcony where he'd kissed her beneath the stars, the table where she'd whispered promises meant only for his ears. "Drowning your sorrows, Mr. Rice." A sultry voice cut through his thoughts. Cynthia Laurie appeared beside him in a red dress that clung to her curves like a second skin, the neckline plunging dangerously low. The daughter of his business partner, Giuseppe Laurie, she'd always been overtly flirtatious, but Declan had never paid much attention. Tonight, however, her presence offered a welcome distraction from memories that threatened to suffocate him. "Just observing," he replied, forcing a smile. "A man like you shouldn't be observing life. You should be living it." Her fingers brushed, his arm lingering just long enough to make her intentions clear. "Perhaps I could help with that." In another life, Declan would have politely extracted himself from the conversation. Tonight, he found himself leaning closer, drawn to the uncomplicated desire in her eyes, so different from the complex emotions that had filled Angie's gaze in their final weeks together. "And how exactly would you propose to do that?" he asked, surprising himself with the edge of invitation in his voice. Cynthia's red lips curved into a predatory smile. "I have a suite upstairs, much quieter than this tiresome party." Across town, Angie Sol, she'd reverted to her maiden name immediately after the divorce, clutched the edge of her bathroom sink, and another wave of nausea crashed over her. For weeks, she'd attributed the constant sickness to grief, to the stress of rebuilding her life from the shattered pieces Declan had left behind. But as she sank to the cold tile floor, a different possibility began to take shape in her mind. "It's impossible," she whispered to the empty apartment, counting back days with shaking fingers. Yet the signs were all there. The missed periods, the unexplained fatigue, the strange aversions to food she'd always loved. Her hands trembled as she fumbled with the pregnancy test she'd purchased that morning, more out of a need to confirm what she already knew than any real doubt. 3 minutes later, staring at the 2 pink lines that appeared with startling clarity, Angie felt the floor drop away beneath her. "Oh, God," she breathed, collapsing against the bathtub. "Oh, my God." In the Rosewood Hotel's penthouse suite, Declan allowed himself to drown in sensations. Yinzia was all fire and demand, her touch bold where Angie's had been tender, her kisses aggressive where Angie's had been sweet. He welcomed the differences, desperate to erase the memory of the only woman he'd ever truly loved. When Cinzia straddled him, her body moving with practiced precision, Declan closed his eyes. For just a moment, as pleasure mounted, Angie's face appeared in his mind. Her soft smile, the way her eyes darkened with desire, how she would whisper his name like a prayer. Declan, Cinzia moaned, but it was wrong. Too sharp, too calculated. He buried the comparison, focusing on the physical sensations, on the release that temporarily quieted the howling emptiness within him. Later, as Cinzia slept beside him, crimson, nails stark against white sheets, Declan stared at the ceiling, feeling more alone than ever. This meaningless encounter had only highlighted what he'd lost. He slipped from the bed, gathered his clothes, and left without waking her. But Cinzia Laurie was not a woman easily dismissed. Over the following weeks, she appeared everywhere. At business meetings with her father, at restaurants where Declan dined, even at his office with convenient excuses about documents her father needed signed. Each time, she offered the same escape, physical pleasure without emotional complications. And each time, Declan accepted, telling himself it meant nothing while desperately hoping that eventually it might mean something. "You're going where?" Angie's mother asked over the phone, concern evident in her voice. "To Dr. Patel's office," Angie replied, one hand resting protectively on her still flat stomach. "I need to confirm everything. Do you want me to come with you?" The offer was gentle, understanding. Angie hesitated. Since the divorce, she'd been fiercely independent, refusing help from even her closest family members. But the weight of what might be happening felt too enormous to bear alone. "Yes," she admitted, "I think I do." The waiting room at Dr. Patel's office was filled with expectant mothers, their rounded bellies a stark reminder of what had been beyond Angie's reach for so long. She stared at her folded hands, unable to look at the hopeful glow on their faces. The easy way they caressed their stomachs, the partners who sat attentively beside them. "Angie Saul," the nurse called her name, and Angie rose on unsteady legs. Dr. Patel was a small woman with kind eyes and efficient movements. "You believe you're pregnant?" she asked, reviewing the intake form. "Yes, I took a home test," Angie replied, her voice barely audible. "But it must be a mistake. I was told I couldn't conceive naturally." "Medicine isn't always exact," Dr. Patel said with a small smile. "Let's have a look, shall we?" The cold gel on Angie's stomach made her flinch. As the ultrasound wand moved across her abdomen, she held her breath, afraid to hope yet unable to stop herself. Dr. Patel's expression changed from professional interest to surprise, her eyebrows rising as she studied the screen. "Well, Miss Saul," she corrected herself, "it appears you are indeed pregnant." Tears filled Angie's eyes. "Are you sure?" "Quite sure," Dr. Patel confirmed, then hesitated. "But there's more. I'm detecting multiple heartbeats." The room seemed to spin around Angie. "Multiple? As in twins?" Dr. Patel adjusted the wand, studying the screen intently. "Actually, I'm seeing 3 distinct heartbeats. You're carrying triplets, Ms. Saul." 3 heartbeats. 3 tiny lives growing inside her, inside the body that doctors had declared unlikely. To ever conceive even one child, the miracle of it stole Angie's breath. Is everything okay with them?" she managed to ask. "They appear healthy at this stage," Dr. Patel assured her, "though multiples always carry additional risks. We'll want to monitor you closely." As her mother embraced her in the parking lot afterward, Angie finally allowed herself to break down. Tears of joy and terror and grief all mingling together. "What am I going to do?" she sobbed. 3 babies. How can I possibly do this alone?" Her mother stroked her hair, just as she had when Angie was a child. "You're not alone, sweetheart. You have us." "Should I tell him?" Angie whispered the question, that had been haunting her since the moment she'd seen those two pink lines. Her mother's expression hardened slightly. The man who left you because you couldn't give him children, who's already been photographed with that Lorry woman. Angie flinched. She'd seen the pictures too. Declan emerging from restaurants with Cynthia on his arm. The easy way the woman touched him, claimed him. The tabloids were having a field day with the new couple, especially given the speed with which Declan had moved on. He has a right to know, Angie said weakly, though even to her own ears the words lacked conviction. He gave up that right when he signed those papers, her mother said firmly. These babies are yours, Angie, yours alone. 6 weeks after the divorce, Declan sat across from Cynthia in an exclusive restaurant, watching as she admired the massive diamond ring on her finger. The proposal had been impulsive, driven by his desperate need to move forward rather than genuine love. Cynthia had accepted with calculated enthusiasm, already planning a wedding that would be the social event of the season. "Daddy is thrilled," she purred, manicured nails scrolling through venue options on her phone, occasionally brushing his hand with deliberate seduction. "He's always thought a merger between our families would be beneficial." Declan managed a tight smile as her foot slid suggestively against his calf under the table. A business transaction with sexual benefits. That's what this marriage would be. Painfully different from the deep, soul-binding love that had connected him to Angie. "The Rosewood Ballroom is available in 3 weeks," Cynthia continued, completely oblivious to his inner turmoil. "I think an immediate wedding is best, don't you?" He nodded automatically, his mind drifting back to last night's dream. Angie, reading in bed, glasses perched on her nose, skin glowing in lamplight. In the dream, she'd been cradling something precious that remained just beyond his vision. "Declan." Cynthia's sharp tone sliced through his thoughts, her eyes narrowing. "I need you present when I'm speaking to you." 3 weeks sounds perfect, he lied, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Cynthia reached across the table, her red nails scraping lightly against his wrist in a gesture meant to be seductive. "I can't wait to be Mrs. Rice," she purred. "We're going to be the perfect power couple." As she detailed her plans for their lavish wedding, Declan tried to ignore the hollow feeling expanding in his chest. This was what he wanted, a fresh start, a chance at the family he'd always envisioned. So why did it feel like he was signing away his soul? On the morning of their wedding, Declan stood at the window of his penthouse, adjusting his cufflinks with mechanical precision. In just a few hours, he would pledge his life to a woman he barely knew, all because he couldn't bear the emptiness Angie had left behind. Across the city, Angie lay in a hospital bed, monitors beeping steadily as doctors rushed around her. At just 12 weeks pregnant, complications had arisen that threatened the precious lives within her. As she slipped into unconsciousness, her last thought was of Declan, of how, even now, some part of her wished he was holding her hand through this nightmare. Neither knew how closely their lives remained intertwined, separated by circumstance, but connected by 3 tiny heartbeats that defied all medical expectations. Chapter 3. Unexpected Blessings. Angie awoke to the rhythmic beeping of hospital monitors, antiseptic scent filling her nostrils. Disorientation gave way to panic as memory returned, the searing cramps, the terrifying blood on her thighs, the frantic drive to emergency. "The babies," she whispered, hands flying to her still flat stomach. "Please, are they—" All 3 heartbeats remained strong, the nurse assured her, adjusting an IV line. Dr. Patel managed to stop the hemorrhaging. "She'll be in shortly to explain everything." Relief flooded Angie in a dizzying wave. 3 heartbeats, still there, still fighting, still defying medical impossibility inside her body. Dr. Patel arrived minutes later, her typically professional demeanor softened with genuine wonder. You gave us quite a scare, Ms. Soul. Multiple pregnancies are always high risk, but yours is particularly miraculous given your medical history. How is this even possible? Angie asked, voicing the question that had consumed her since that first positive test. Every specialist said I couldn't conceive naturally. Medicine isn't exact science, Dr. Patel replied with a small smile. We deal in probabilities, not absolutes. What happened in your case is extraordinarily rare, but clearly not impossible. She gestured toward the ultrasound monitor. Would you like to see them? The cold gel on Angie's stomach made her gasp. As the wand moved across her abdomen, 3 distinct shapes appeared on screen. Tiny, pulsing forms with flickering heartbeats that brought fresh tears to her eyes. Would you like to know the genders? Dr. Patel asked. Angie nodded wordlessly, overwhelmed by these fragile lives somehow thriving against all odds. Based on what I can see, you're carrying 2 boys and a girl, the doctor announced, pointing to each shape in turn. All developing beautifully despite the scare. 2 boys and a girl, Declan's children, the family he'd abandoned her for being unable to provide. The cruel irony threatened to choke her. Bed rest, limited activity. The words swirled in Angie's mind as she contemplated the months ahead. Alone, carrying 3 lives, her body transforming in ways she had once desperately hoped for, but now faced without the partner she'd imagined beside her. Is there someone who can stay with you? Dr. Patel asked, seeming to read her thoughts. These restrictions are serious, Ms. Saul. You'll need support. Angie nodded, blinking back tears. My parents, they can help. Later that evening, settled in her childhood bedroom at her parents' suburban home, Angie scrolled through her phone, thumb hovering over Declan's contact. Should she tell him? These were his children too, the legacy he'd so desperately wanted that he'd discarded her to pursue it elsewhere. A notification popped up, a gossip site she'd forgotten to unfollow. Tech mogul Declan Rice and socialite Cynthia Laurie exchange, who vows in lavish ceremony. The accompanying photo showed Declan in a tailored tuxedo, hand possessively on Cynthia's waist as she showcased her enormous diamond ring for the cameras. Their wedding had happened barely 6 weeks after the divorce papers were signed. Something shattered inside Angie, any remaining obligation she might have felt evaporating instantly. He hadn't even waited 2 months before replacing her. Now, he smiled for cameras, with a woman whose fertile potential apparently outweighed 5 years of shared history and supposedly eternal love. These children are mine, she whispered fiercely, protectively cradling her still flat stomach where 3 miracle lives grew. Mine alone. Across the city, in the opulent honeymoon suite of the Rosewood Hotel, Declan lay awake beside his sleeping bride. Their wedding night had been physically satisfying, but emotionally hollow. Cynthia's practiced moves designed to impress rather than connect. Her cries theatrical rather than authentic. As she slept, Declan stared at the ceiling, shame flooding him as he realized that throughout their passionate consummation, he'd closed his eyes and imagined Angie's face, Angie's body, Angie's genuine responses that never needed exaggeration. Even as he'd moved inside his new wife, his mind had betrayed him with vivid memories of the woman he'd left behind. The way Angie would whisper his name like a prayer at the height of pleasure. How her body would tremble against his afterward. The perfect feeling of falling asleep still joined as one. Now, in the quiet aftermath of passion, emptiness threatened to consume him. He'd married Cynthia, hoping to fill the void Angie had left, but somehow, the void had only grown larger. As weeks turned into months, Angie's body transformed dramatically. By her 5th month, her once slender frame had rounded into a perfect maternal shape, her skin glowing despite the challenging pregnancy. Dr. Patel had prescribed strict bed rest after another bleeding scare, leaving Angie confined to her bedroom, except for doctor appointments. On one such afternoon, lying on the examination table for her regular checkup, Angie watched in awe as three distinct profiles appeared on the ultrasound screen. Tiny noses, waving hands, the outline of spines perfectly formed. "They're doing remarkably well," Dr. Patel assured her. "All measuring exactly where they should be despite sharing such limited space." That night, alone in her bedroom, Angie began speaking to them for the first time, hands caressing the stretched skin of her belly where movement had become constant, little flutters and kicks that sometimes took her breath away. "Logan," she whispered to the left side where the most active baby frequently kicked. "Lucas," to the right where his brother seemed more peaceful. And Luna, in the center, where the smallest of the three nestled protectively between her brothers. "Your daddy would have loved you," she admitted in darkness, tears sliding down her cheeks as she imagined Declan's face if he could see the miracle growing inside her. "He would have read to you every night, taught you to swim, planned your futures before you were even born." Her voice broke, "But he chose a different path, and now we'll make our own way together." In her dreams that night, Angie saw Declan holding their children, his face illuminated with the joy she'd once hoped to give him. The vision was so vivid she woke, gasping, arms outstretched toward a phantom that dissolved with consciousness. Meanwhile, Declan's honeymoon period with Kinsia had faded with brutal speed. 3 months into their marriage, her true nature had fully emerged, demanding, materialistic, and interested in him primarily as a checkbook and status symbol. She spent his money extravagantly, used sex as currency when she wanted something particular, and made little effort to hide her boredom with his work. "We should start trying for a baby," she announced one evening over dinner, the statement calculated and cold. Declan nearly choked on his wine. "Already? We've barely settled into marriage." Cynthia's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Daddy's been asking about grandchildren. Besides, isn't that why you married me? To start the family your ex-wife couldn't give you?" The cruelty of her words stunned him into silence. Was that truly how she viewed their marriage? A transaction where she provided the children Angie couldn't? "I think we should wait," he finally said, setting down his glass carefully. "Get to know each other better first." Cinzia's expression hardened momentarily before shifting to a practiced pout. "If that's what you want." She rose from her chair, moving around the table to perch on his lap, her hand sliding suggestively up his thigh. "But perhaps I can change your mind." Later, as she moved above him in their bed, Declan closed his eyes, trying to lose himself in physical sensation. But when release finally came, it was Angie's name that formed silently on his lips, a betrayal that left him feeling hollow and ashamed. By her 7th month, Angie's body had become almost unrecognizable. The triplets grew rapidly, transforming her once slender form into a monument to motherhood. Movement became increasingly difficult, each step deliberate and careful. Still, she found unexpected joy in her changing shape, the visible proof of the miracle growing within her. Her mother had converted the guest room into a nursery, 3 cribs arranged in a semicircle, walls painted a soft yellow that would suit both boys and girls. Each night, Angie would sit in the rocking chair, imagining the room filled with her children's laughter. "You'll need help," her father observed one evening, watching her struggle to rise from the chair. "More than your mother and I can provide once they're born. I'll hire a night nurse," Angie replied, having already researched the possibility. The divorce settlement from Declan had been generous, one thing she couldn't fault him for, providing enough financial security for her to focus solely on motherhood for the foreseeable future. "And what about when they ask about their father?" Her father pressed gently. Angie's hands cradled her swollen belly protectively. "I'll tell them the truth, that he chose another path, but that doesn't diminish how special they are." As her due date approached, strange dreams began to plague Angie's nights. In one recurring vision, She stood in pouring rain, 3 small children dancing around her, while Declan watched from a distance, his face contorted with longing. She would wake from these dreams breathless and disoriented, as if they were premonitions, rather than subconscious fears. At 34 weeks, considered full term for triplets, Angie's water broke during a routine checkup. Within hours, she found herself in the delivery room, overwhelmed by contractions that tore through her body with increasing intensity. "I can't do this," she gasped between waves of pain, gripping her mother's hand with white-knuckled desperation. "Declan should be here. I need him." "You're stronger than you know," her mother whispered, wiping sweat from Angie's forehead. "You don't need him. You never did." The delivery was grueling, each baby requiring careful monitoring. Logan arrived first, his powerful cry filling the room before he was whisked away for assessment. Lucas followed 17 minutes later, smaller but equally vocal. When Luna finally emerged, silent and alarmingly tiny, terrifying seconds passed before a stimulating touch from the doctor produced the most beautiful sound Angie had ever heard, her daughter's indignant wail joining her brother's. "All healthy," Dr. Patel announced triumphantly as the neonatal team examined each infant. "Luna's a bit smaller, but her vitals are perfect." When the nurses finally placed the swaddled bundles in Angie's exhausted arms, love, unlike anything she'd ever experienced, engulfed her, fierce, primal, and absolute. Staring into their tiny faces, she saw Declan everywhere. In Logan's strong jawline, in Lucas's contemplative expression, in Luna's striking blue eyes that seemed to hold knowledge beyond her minutes of life. "Hello, my miracles," she whispered through tears. "We're going to be extraordinary together." Across the city, Declan awakened violently from deep sleep, heart pounding, perspiration soaking the sheets. Cynthia stirred beside him, annoyed by the disturbance. "What is wrong with you?" she muttered, turning away. Declan sat up, trying to capture the dream that had catapulted him to consciousness. 3 newborn babies crying for him, their tiny hands reaching out as they faded into darkness. The vision had been so vivid that his arms actually ached with emptiness, his chest constricted with inexplicable loss. "Nothing," he replied automatically, though everything felt profoundly wrong in ways he couldn't articulate. "Go back to sleep." Moving to the window, Declan stared out at pre-dawn darkness, unaware that at that precise moment his blood and legacy lived on in 3 perfect newborns cradled in their mother's loving arms. Chapter 4: Phantom Happiness. 3 years passed in parallel worlds, separated by an uncrossable chasm of decisions and consequences. In Angie's modest suburban home, joy overflowed from every corner despite the challenges of single motherhood. In Declan's sprawling mansion, opulence couldn't disguise the hollow emptiness of a life built on wrong choices. Morning sunlight streamed through Angie's kitchen windows as she attempted to feed 3 squirming toddlers simultaneously. Logan, showing his father's determined nature in every gesture, insisted on using his spoon alone, despite catastrophic results. More oatmeal decorating his dinosaur pajamas than reaching his mouth. Lucas, methodical and precise, carefully selected blueberries one by one, examining each before eating as if conducting scientific analysis. Luna, smallest yet fiercest, rejected the oatmeal entirely, her blue eyes startlingly identical to Declan's, flashing with stubborn defiance that was both maddening and endearing. "Just 3 bites, Luna love," Angie coaxed, brushing dark curls from her daughter's forehead with gentle fingers. "Then you can have yogurt instead." "No," Luna declared firmly, chin jutting forward in a gesture so reminiscent of Declan during boardroom standoffs that Angie's heart constricted painfully. "No oatmeal." "Look, Mama!" Lucas called suddenly, holding his spoon with perfect balance, not a drop spilled. The proud accomplishment in his expression made Angie's chest swell with, "Love, that's amazing, sweetheart," she praised, dropping a kiss on his head, where morning light caught in his hair like spun gold. Logan, not to be outdone, attempted the same maneuver, but only succeeded in launching his spoon across the kitchen, splattering oatmeal on the refrigerator. His face crumpled instantly, lower lip trembling with the imminent threat of tears. "Hey, my brave boy," Angie said quickly, gathering him into her lap where his small body fit perfectly against hers. "That was an excellent throw. You'll be pitching for the major leagues someday." The potential crisis averted, Angie breathed a silent prayer of gratitude for these moments. The chaotic, messy, beautiful reality of raising three spirited children who had somehow saved her when she thought herself beyond salvation. The bone-deep exhaustion, the career indefinitely suspended, the rare adult conversations. None of it mattered compared to the miracle of these three lives entrusted to her. Care. After breakfast came the whirlwind of bathing and dressing, each child requiring individual attention and negotiation. Logan shrieked if water touched his face. Lucas needed socks perfectly aligned with no seams touching his toes. And Luna rejected outfit after outfit, insisting on choosing her own clothes, usually a wild combination of patterns and colors that made Angie wince, but accept with grace. By mid-morning, their living room had transformed into an elaborate, imaginative landscape. Angie sat cross-legged on the floor, watching her children create their own world. Lucas constructed an intricate block tower, tongue caught between his teeth in concentration, the same expression Declan wore when solving complex problems. Logan raced cars around the perimeter, creating elaborate crash scenarios, complete with explosive sound effects. Luna, cradling her favorite doll, whispered secrets in its plastic ear with the intensity of sharing vital information. "Tell me about my daddy," Luna said suddenly, looking up with those piercing blue eyes that never failed to make Angie's breath catch. The question, though anticipated, still cut deep into places Angie thought had healed. "Your daddy," she began, carefully having rehearsed this response many times in the mirror, "is a very smart man who helped create three amazing little people. He has your eyes, Luna, and Logan's determined chin. Lucas got his creative way of solving problems." "Does he love us?" Lucas asked, abandoning his tower to join the suddenly serious conversation. Angie swallowed the knot forming in her throat. "I'm sure if he knew you, he would love you more than anything in the world." "Why doesn't he visit?" Logan demanded with characteristic directness, toy car forgotten in his small fist. "Sometimes grown-ups make choices that take them in different directions," Angie explained, opening her arms. The triplets immediately abandoned their toys to pile into her embrace, three warm bodies fitting against her like puzzle pieces. "But you have me, and I love you enough for two parents." "Can we see a picture?" Luna persisted, her determination pure Declan. Angie hesitated only briefly before retrieving a photo album from the bookshelf. She had debated removing all images of Declan, but ultimately decided the children deserved to know their heritage. She opened to a candid shot from their second anniversary. Declan laughing at something off-camera, his expression carefree and genuine in a way it rarely was during their final months together. "That's your daddy," she said softly, the familiar ache resurfacing despite 3 years of determined independence. Three small heads bent over the photograph, studying it with solemn intensity. Luna reached out, touching Declan's face with a gentle finger, as if trying to memorize its contours. "He has my eyes," she whispered with wonder. "And my chin," Logan declared proudly, though the resemblance was more imagination than reality. "He looks nice," Lucas concluded thoughtfully, with the careful judgment that characterized his approach to everything. That night, after tucking 3 tired toddlers into bed with stories and songs and the particular bedtime ritual each required, Angie discovered Luna had smuggled the photograph under her pillow. The sight brought fresh tears, but she left it there, understanding her daughter's need for connection to the father she'd never known. Across the city, in a mansion that echoed with emptiness despite its opulence, Declan Rice stared blankly at quarterly financial reports spread across his imported mahogany desk. 3 years into his catastrophic marriage with Cinzia, his life had become a hollow performance. Professional success masking personal failure, wealth unable to purchase genuine connection. Working late again, Cinzia's voice held neither concern nor affection as she appeared in his doorway. She wore an expensive silk negligee, clearly selected to entice, though her eyes remained calculating, even in attempted seduction. Declan glanced up briefly, noting the strategic exposure of flesh designed to manipulate rather than express genuine desire. The Singapore merger is at a critical stage. You and your precious company. She sighed with theatrical disappointment, moving into the room with practiced sensuality. Her hand trailed across his shoulder, nails lightly scraping his neck in a gesture she'd once discovered could arouse him. Have you forgotten what today is? He searched his memory for significance. Their anniversary had passed last month with an obligatory dinner where they'd barely spoken. Her birthday wasn't until December. Important business milestones were meticulously recorded in his calendar. Seeing his genuine confusion, Cinzia's mask of seduction slipped, revealing the coldness beneath. The fertility specialist appointment, Declan. We were supposed to discuss the results today. Guilt flooded him. After 3 years of increasingly mechanical attempts at conception, their intimate life reduced to clinical scheduling and performance anxiety, they had finally sought medical intervention at Cinzia's insistence. I'm sorry, he said mechanically, the words empty from overuse. How did it go? All my tests came back perfect, she replied with triumphant satisfaction, which means the problem must be with you. The accusation hung between them like a gauntlet thrown. Declan set down his pen, suddenly exhausted by the charade their marriage had become. Every interaction calculated, every touch negotiated, sex reduced to a means of production rather than expression of love. He thought of Angie, how she'd touch him spontaneously, her body responding to his without agenda, intimacy flowing naturally between them, even during the worst of their fertility struggles. I'll schedule my tests next week, he said flatly. Cinzia moved behind him, her hands sliding over his shoulders in a possessive gesture that resembled ownership more than affection. Her expensive perfume, too heavy, too artificial, made him suppress a grimace as she leaned close. We don't need to wait. She purred against his ear, her breath hot against his skin. I checked your schedule and made the appointment for Thursday. Her hands moved lower, reaching for his belt. Until then, we should keep trying the natural way. When Declan didn't immediately respond to her practiced caresses, genuine anger flashed across her perfect features. What's wrong with you? She demanded, fingers digging painfully into his shoulder. It's been 3 weeks since you've touched me. I have a deadline, he said, gesturing to the papers before him, relieved to have a legitimate excuse. The truth, that her touch left him cold, that intimacy felt like a business transaction between them, would only escalate the brewing confrontation. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow, Cinzia echoed, sarcasm dripping from every syllable as she straightened. It's always tomorrow with you, Declan. Something's wrong and has been for a long time. Do you think I don't notice how you close your eyes when we have sex? How you never look at me? Whose face are you seeing when you finally manage to perform? The dangerously accurate question hung unanswered as she stalked from the room, slamming the door with enough force to rattle the expensive art on his walls. Alone again, Declan abandoned all pretense of work, moving to stare out at distant city lights that blurred through unshed tears. His thoughts drifted, as they inevitably did during quiet moments, to Angie. What was she doing now? Had she found happiness? Had she met someone who appreciated her extraordinary heart, her genuine passion, her quiet strength? Memories ambushed him without warning. Angie curled against him in sleep, her body instinctively seeking his warmth. Angie laughing breathlessly beneath him as they made love, her eyes holding his with complete trust. Angie gently guiding his hand to her stomach, imagining together the child they might create. In their bedroom, Cynthia was already scrolling through her phone when he entered, her interest in seduction apparently abandoned. Her indifference was almost a relief. "I'm thinking of renovating the guest room," she said without looking up, "into a nursery." The idea of a nursery designed by Cynthia made something twist painfully in Declan's chest. He imagined chrome and stark white designer furniture selected for appearance rather than comfort, a sterile shrine to achievement rather than a warm sanctuary for a child. "Isn't that premature?" he asked, removing his tie with mechanical precision. "We don't even know if there's an issue yet." Cynthia's eyes narrowed dangerously. "There won't be a problem. I will have a child, Declan, the rice heir everyone expects." Her emphasis on "I" rather than "we" wasn't subtle. For the first time, Declan confronted the magnitude of his mistake, not just in leaving Angie, but in binding himself to this cold, calculating woman whose interest in motherhood had nothing to do with love and everything to do with securing her position. Sleep eluded him that night, as it had increasingly over the past year. Beside him, Cynthia's breathing remained even, unburdened by the doubts that plagued him. When he finally drifted into restless slumber near dawn, his dreams were filled with children's laughter and a sense of belonging so powerful it left him, gasping upon waking, the emptiness of reality, a physical pain in his chest. The next morning, Angie bundled the triplets into colorful raincoats despite their protests. April showers had been relentless, but cabin fever made even her typically calm Lucas increasingly restless, prone to the rare tantrums that suggested he'd inherited his father's carefully controlled temper after all. "Puddle jumping," Logan shouted with characteristic enthusiasm as they stepped outside, immediately targeting the largest muddy pool in their driveway. "Stay where I can see you," Angie cautioned, helping Luna adjust her hood, "and hold hands crossing the street." To the park. The neighborhood park had become their sanctuary, close enough to walk to, with equipment sized perfectly for toddlers and enough space for 3 energetic children to burn inexhaustible energy. Despite persistent drizzle, other brave parents had ventured out, exchanging knowing looks of solidarity as their children squealed with delight over muddy puddles and rain-slick slides. Angie settled on a bench, watching her miracles explore their rain-soaked kingdom. Luna, fearless despite her tiny size, conquered the highest platform of the play structure, her triumphant expression identical to one Angie had seen countless times on Declan's face after business victories. Lucas methodically collected colored stones, arranging them in intricate patterns only he understood, his focus absolute. Logan charged from slide to swing to climbing frame, leaving chaos and laughter in his wake. "They're beautiful," an elderly woman commented, stopping beside Angie's bench. "Triplets, aren't they? You must have your hands full." "Thank you," Angie replied with genuine warmth. "They keep me constantly on my toes, but I wouldn't trade it for anything." "No father in the picture?" the woman asked, her tone curious rather than judgmental. The familiar pang struck Angie's heart, though 3 years had dulled its sharpness. "No, it's just us." The woman patted her shoulder with grandmotherly affection. "You're doing a wonderful job. Anyone can see how happy and secure they are." As the woman moved on, Angie called to her children, 10 more minutes, then home for lunch and naps." Luna spotted a particularly inviting puddle and called to her brothers with imperious confidence. The 3 joined hands and began spinning, In circles, faces tilted to the gentle rain, their uninhibited laughter rising like the most perfect music. Watching them, these miraculous extensions of herself and Declan, these living embodiments of love that had survived even when the relationship that created them had disintegrated, Angie felt a completeness that transcended lingering sorrow. In this moment, in the pure joy of her children playing in the rain, she had found happiness more profound than anything she had imagined possible on that devastating day Declan had walked away. Whatever challenges lay ahead, the gift of these three perfect beings made every tear worthwhile. Unknown to her across the city, Declan stood before an empty room in his massive house, envisioning a nursery that would never materialize. Something deep within him knew that somewhere, something precious that rightfully belonged to him existed just beyond his reach. A family that should have been his, happiness he had foolishly discarded for empty ambition and a hollow legacy. Chapter 5. Public Disgrace, Private Revelation. The grand ballroom of the Meridian Hotel glittered with chandeliers and the flash of expensive jewelry as the elite of the business world gathered to celebrate the third wedding anniversary of Declan Rice and Cynthia Laurie Rice. The opulent affair had been entirely Cynthia's creation. Declan had merely signed the checks and agreed to appear. Magnificent party, Rice, Giuseppe Laurie boomed, clapping his son-in-law on the shoulder with enough force to slosh champagne from Declan's barely touched glass. My daughter knows how to make an impression, no? Declan forced a smile, adjusting his bow tie. She certainly does. His father-in-law leaned closer, breath heavy with scotch. So, when will we hear the pitter-patter of little feet? My wife is eager for grandchildren to spoil. The familiar question struck Declan like a physical blow. 3 years of increasingly clinical attempts at conception had yielded nothing but frustration and growing distance between him and Cynthia. The fertility specialists had found no obvious issues with either of them, just an unexplained inability to create the child they supposedly both wanted. We're working on it, Declan replied diplomatically. These things take time. Giuseppe's eyebrows rose. Not usually this much time for a healthy young couple, my boy. Perhaps you're not trying. Hard enough, eh? He punctuated this with a vulgar wink before moving on to greet another guest. Left alone at the edge of the crowd, Declan surveyed the room, searching for his wife. He spotted her across the ballroom, holding court with a group of social media influencers, her silver gown catching the light with each calculated movement. She was beautiful, objectively, undeniably so, yet he felt nothing watching her. No pride, no desire, certainly no love. 3 years of marriage had revealed Cynthia's true nature with painful clarity. The passionate, seemingly adoring woman who had helped him escape his grief over Angie had disappeared within weeks of the wedding, replaced by a coldly ambitious social climber who viewed him as little more than a stepping stone to wealth and status. "You'd look like you could use something stronger than champagne," observed Richard Chen, Declan's closest friend and CFO of Rice Enterprises, materializing beside him. "That obvious? Only to someone who knows you." Richard exchanged Declan's champagne for a tumbler of whiskey. "Happy anniversary, by the way." Declan took a grateful sip, letting the alcohol burn away some of his tension. "Thanks." 3 years, Richard mused. "Wasn't that around when you and Angie—" "Don't!" Declan cut him off sharply. Richard had been the only one who had questioned his divorce from Angie, the only one who had expressed concern about his hasty remarriage. The implied "I told you so" hung uncomfortably between them. "Sorry," Richard apologized. "Just checking where your head's at. You've seemed distant lately." Before Declan could respond, a commotion near the bar drew their attention. Cynthia's voice, louder than appropriate for the elegant setting, carried across the room. "Another martini," she demanded, swaying slightly. "And don't be stingy with..." The vodka this time. The bartender glanced uncertainly toward Declan, who nodded reluctantly. Creating a scene by cutting her off would be worse than letting her have another drink. "She's been hitting it hard tonight," Richard observed quietly. "She's celebrating," Declan replied, though the bitter edge in his voice betrayed his true feelings. As the evening progressed, Cynthia's behavior grew increasingly erratic. Her laughter became too loud, her gestures exaggerated, her flirtation with several male guests crossing the line from charming to inappropriate. Declan watched with growing dread, recognizing the signs of her building toward one of her explosive episodes. Still, he was unprepared for what happened next. Cynthia clinked a spoon against her glass, the sharp sound cutting through conversation. "May I have everyone's attention?" "Please," she called, her words slightly slurred but clear enough. "I'd like to make a toast on this special occasion." The room quieted as guests turned toward her. Declan moved closer, apprehension tightening his chest. 3 years ago, I married Declan Rice," Cynthia began, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Handsome, successful, from one of the city's most prestigious families. The perfect catch, or so I thought." Uneasy laughter rippled through the crowd. Declan froze, sensing disaster but powerless to stop it. "What no one told me," Cynthia continued, her voice hardening, "was that I was marrying a man who can't or won't perform his husbandly duties." Shocked silence fell over the room. Declan felt blood drain from his face as every eye turned to him. 3 years, Cynthia's voice rose, venom replacing celebration. 3 years watching him flinch when I touch him. 3 years of him calling out another woman's name in bed. Her crystal glass shattered on the marble floor as she pointed an accusing finger. "You know what I think? I think our marriage was never consummated in his heart. That would explain why he can't get it up unless he's fantasizing about his ex-wife." A collective gasp rippled through the stunned crowd. "Cynthia!" Declan growled, striding toward her, blood roaring in his ears. "That's enough! Don't touch me!" she shrieked, recoiling with theatrical horror. Her voice rose to ensure every guest could hear. "I want a divorce, and everyone should know that James Harrington has been fucking me senseless for months while my husband broods over Angie's photograph." The room froze in horrified silence. Declan stood paralyzed, humiliation burning through him like acid, as Cynthia's words destroyed everything. His reputation, his dignity, the carefully constructed facade of his life after Angie. "At least James knows what a woman needs," she continued. Mercilessly, champagne sloshing from her glass onto her silver gown. "He doesn't cry another woman's name when he comes." The revelation of her affair with his chief competitor barely registered through Declan's shock. He was aware of Richard's steadying hand on his shoulder, of Giuseppe's purple face as he stormed toward his daughter, of the avid interest on the faces of those who had called themselves friends. "I think you should leave," Richard said quietly. "I'll handle this." Declan nodded mutely, unable to form words. With as much dignity as he could muster, he walked toward the exit, back straight, despite the crushing weight of public humiliation. Outside, the heavens had opened, rain pouring in sheets that instantly soaked through his expensive tuxedo. Declan dismissed his waiting driver with a curt gesture and began walking. No destination in mind, merely the need to move, to escape. For 3 miles he walked through the deluge, oblivious to passing cars and concerned glances from strangers. His mind replayed not just Cynthia's public disgrace, but the entire path that had led him to this moment. The decision to leave Angie, the rush into a new marriage, the gradual realization of his catastrophic mistake. Eventually, disoriented and chilled to the bone, Declan found himself in an unfamiliar residential neighborhood. Elegant townhouses gave way to modest family homes with neat gardens and bicycles on porches. The rain had lessened to a gentle patter, but Declan was already soaked beyond caring. He paused at a small neighborhood park, drawn by the unexpected. Sound of children's laughter despite the late hour and inclement weather. Through the curtain of rain, he made out a woman and 3 small children splashing in puddles under the glow of a street lamp. Something about the scene tugged at him. The woman's graceful movements as she twirled with the children, her laughter mingling with theirs, the simple joy that radiated from their play. As lightning briefly illuminated the playground, Declan caught a glimpse of the woman's face. His heart stopped. Angie. She looked more beautiful than he remembered. Her face softened, her smile wider, her body moving with a confidence she'd lacked before. And the children. Declan squinted through the rain. 2 boys and a girl, all around 3 years old. The timing registered like a thunderbolt. 3 years, triplets. Without conscious thought, he lurched forward, crossing the street blindly. A car horn blared as headlights illuminated his soaked figure, the vehicle swerving to avoid him. Declan barely noticed, his focus entirely on the playground ahead. "Angie!" he called, voice breaking. "Angie, wait!" But when he reached the playground, it was empty. The swings moved gently in the rain, but there was no sign of Angie or the children. Had he imagined them? Was his mind, strained by the evening's humiliation, conjuring what he most deeply regretted losing? "You just missed them," a voice said. Startling him, an elderly man stood under the awning of a small convenience store adjacent to the park, watching Declan curiously. "The woman and children," Declan said breathlessly. "Where did they go?" The man shrugged. "Home, I expect. That pretty single mother comes here often with her triplets. They like playing in the rain, though it's usually earlier in the day." Triplets. The word echoed in Declan's mind like a bell. "Do you know her name?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Can't say I do," the man replied, eyeing Declan's bedraggled appearance with suspicion. "You all right, mister? You look like you've had a rough night." "I'm fine," Declan said automatically, though he was anything but. "Thank you." As he walked away, the full implication of what he'd witnessed, or thought he'd witnessed, crashed over him. Angie with 3 children, the exact age their divorce had been finalized. Children who could only be his. But that was impossible. The doctors had been clear about Angie's condition. She couldn't conceive naturally. That had been the whole reason he'd... The weight of his potential mistake staggered him. Had he left Angie, the only woman he'd ever truly loved, because of a medical opinion that proved catastrophically wrong? Had he abandoned her only for her to discover she was carrying his children, their children, after he'd already moved on? The rain mixed with tears on his face as Declan sank onto a nearby bench, the magnitude of his potential loss overwhelming him. If what he suspected was true, he had not only walked away from the love of his life, but from the family he had always wanted. For hours, Declan sat in the rain, memories washing over him like the downpour. Angie's smile the first time they met, the softness of her skin beneath his fingers, the way she'd looked at him as if he were her entire world. Contrasted against these were harsh images of Cinzia's coldness, her calculated seduction, her public humiliation of him just hours before. As dawn broke, painting the rain-washed streets in pale golden light, Declan made a decision. He would find Angie, he would discover the truth about the children, and if they were his, God, if they were actually his, he would do whatever it took to make amends for the greatest mistake of his life. Rising from the bench, clothes still damp and hair plastered to his head, Declan pulled out his phone. The screen lit up with dozens of missed calls and messages, most from Richard, a few from business associates who had witnessed his humiliation. None from Cinzia. Ignoring them all, he dialed a number he hadn't used in 3 years, but still knew by heart. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. "This is Angie Sewell. I can't come to the phone right now, but leave a message," and I'll call you back." The sound of her voice, even in a recorded message, sent a jolt through Declan's system. He opened his mouth to speak, but found he had no words adequate for the moment. What could he possibly say after 3 years of silence, after walking away because she supposedly couldn't give him children, only to discover she might have given him 3? He ended the call without leaving a message, tucking the phone away with trembling fingers. Finding Angie would require more than a simple phone call. It would require dedication, persistence, and more humility than he had ever shown in his life. As he began the long walk back toward the life he had built and then destroyed in a single evening, Declan made a silent vow. If those children were his, if Angie had somehow conceived the family they had both desperately wanted, he would move heaven and earth to be part of their lives. Even if it meant facing Angie's rightful anger, even if it meant starting from nothing to rebuild what he had so carelessly thrown away. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the world washed clean and new. For the first time in 3 years, despite the public disgrace still echoing in his mind, Declan felt something like hope stir in his chest. Chapter 6: Desperate Pursuit. Morning light filtered through the blinds of Declan's hotel suite, highlighting the chaos his life had become. Discarded coffee cups littered the desk beside his laptop, while newspapers splashed with gossip about his failed marriage covered the rumpled bed. 2 weeks had passed since Cynthia's public meltdown, 2 weeks since he'd glimpsed Angie with children who might be his, and his carefully constructed world had disintegrated completely. He hadn't returned to the mansion he'd shared with Cynthia. Richard had arranged for his essential belongings to be delivered to this anonymous suite, sparing him the confrontation that would inevitably come. Divorce papers had already been filed, fast-tracked by his attorneys to minimize the scandal's impact on the company. Declan ran his fingers through unkempt hair, eyes burning from lack of sleep. His laptop screen displayed an email from his private investigator, another dead end in his search for Angie. She had vanished from their shared social circles, moved from her last known address, even changed her number. It was as if she had deliberately erased every connection to her former life with him. Declan closed his eyes, surrendering to memories he'd suppressed for 3 years. Angie on their wedding night, shy despite their previous intimacy, her naked body illuminated by moonlight. As she moved toward him with such trust, it had brought him to his knees. Angie in their shower, water cascading down her curves as he pressed her against cool tiles, her breathless gasps echoing in the steam. Angie sleeping beside him, one leg thrown possessively over his, her hair spread across his chest, mumbling his name in her dreams. Most haunting were memories of their passion, how she'd dig her nails into his shoulders when pleasure overwhelmed her, the particular catch in her breath that signaled her release, the way she'd whisper explicit encouragement in his ear that contrasted so beautifully with her public demureness. No woman, certainly not Cynthia with her calculated seduction and theatrical performance, had ever connected with him at that primal level, making him feel simultaneously powerful and vulnerable, completely known yet always desired. Phantom sensations assaulted him, Angie's taste on his tongue, the specific texture of her skin beneath his fingers, the perfect weight of her body against his. How had he convinced himself that theoretical children mattered more than this visceral connection that had branded itself into his very cells? His phone rang, Richard's name flashing on the screen. Declan answered with a grunt. "You need to come." "Oh, to the office," Richard said without preamble. "The board is meeting about the Australia merger, and your absence is being noted." "I'm busy," Declan replied, scrolling through another useless report from the investigator. "You're obsessed," Richard corrected bluntly. "And it's affecting the company, your company, in case you've forgotten." "I saw her, Richard," Declan insisted, a conversation they'd had repeatedly over the past 2 weeks. "Angie, with 3 children exactly the right age." Even if what you saw was real and not some rain-soaked hallucination, Richard said carefully, what exactly is your plan here? The woman you divorced and abandoned shows up 3 years later with children that might be yours, and you think, what? That she'll welcome you back with open arms? The harsh truth silenced Declan momentarily. I need to know, he finally said. I need to know if they're mine. Richard sighed audibly. Fine, keep chasing ghosts, but do it after the board meeting. 2 hours, Declan, clean yourself up and be there. After hanging up, Declan dragged himself to the shower, letting scalding water pound some life back into his exhausted body. As steam filled the bathroom, he braced his hands against the tile wall, mind racing with fragments of dreams that had plagued him nightly since seeing Angie in the rain. In these dreams, 3 small faces called him Daddy. Tiny hands reached for him. Innocent laughter surrounded him. And always, Angie watched from a distance, her expression unreadable as he tried desperately to reach her. Each time he would wake, gasping, arms empty, heart aching with loss for children he'd never known, forcing himself through the motions of shaving and dressing in a fresh suit. Declan looked like a reasonable facsimile of his former self, if one ignored the hollowness in his eyes and the new lines etched around his mouth. Good enough for the board meeting, though barely. At Rice Enterprises headquarters, employees fell silent as he strode through the lobby, whispers following in his wake. News of Cynthia's public accusations and their impending divorce had spread like wildfire through business circles. Speculation about his sexuality, his fertility, his emotional stability, all had become fodder for gossip that he steadfastly ignored. The board meeting passed in a blur of financial projections and expansion strategies that Declan contributed to with mechanical precision, his mind elsewhere. Only after the conference room had emptied did Richard approach, concern evident in his expression. You're falling apart, his friend observed bluntly. I'm fine. You're not, Richard countered. You've barely slept in 2 weeks. You're neglecting the company. You're burning through cash-hiring investigators who are finding nothing. This has to stop, Declan. I can't stop, Declan admitted, vulnerability breaking through his carefully maintained facade. Not until I know. Richard studied him for a long moment before sighing in resignation. What if I told you there might be another way to find her? Declan's head snapped up. What do you mean? I didn't want to mention it because I thought this obsession would run its course, Richard explained reluctantly. But Melissa keeps in touch with some of the women from Angie's old book club. She might know someone who still has contact with her. Hope surged through Declan with such force it left him lightheaded. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because I'm not sure it's healthy, Richard replied candidly, and because I'm not convinced Angie would want to be found by you. Did you consider that she might have good reasons for cutting all ties? The truth of this possibility hit Declan like a physical blow. Of course, Angie wouldn't want to be found by the man who had discarded her at her most vulnerable moment, the man who had remarried with indecent haste, the man who had, perhaps, abandoned not just a wife, but unborn children. I have to try, Declan said quietly. I have to at least know if they're mine. Richard nodded reluctantly. I'll ask Melissa to make some calls. But Declan, he added, expression serious, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that, even if these children are yours, Angie might not want you in their lives. That night, alone in his hotel suite, Declan found himself drawn back to the memory box he'd retrieved from storage, the only tangible remnants of his life with Angie that he'd kept hidden from Cynthia. With reverent hands, he lifted out photographs, ticket stubs, the small jewelry box containing the first gift he'd ever given her, a delicate silver bracelet with a single pearl. At the bottom of the box lay Angie's letters, written during a business trip he'd taken early in their marriage. He unfolded one with trembling fingers, her elegant handwriting washing over him like a caress. My dearest Declan, It's past midnight, and I'm wearing your favorite blue shirt to bed. It still smells like you, which makes the emptiness of our bed slightly more bearable. I keep reaching for you in my sleep, only to find cold sheets where your warmth should be. Today, I walked past that little cafe where we first shared dessert. Remember how you insisted on feeding me tiramisu across the table, not caring who saw? I sat at our table and ordered the same dessert, but it didn't taste the same without you stealing bites and kissing the sweetness from my lips afterward. 3 more days until you're home. 3 days that feel like eternity. Sometimes I wonder if it's normal to miss someone with such physical ache, to feel incomplete when they're not beside you. Is this what they mean by soulmates? This certainty that part of you is missing when they're gone? Come home to me soon. Every inch of me is waiting for you. My body, my heart, my soul. All yours, always. Loving you beyond reason. Angie. A tear splashed onto the faded paper, and Declan hurriedly moved the letter aside to protect it. How had he walked away from a woman who loved him with such completeness? How had he convinced himself that anything, legacy, family name, biological children, mattered more than this rare and precious connection? His phone chimed with a text from Richard. Melissa found someone. Meeting tomorrow, 10 a.m., sending details. Sleep eluded Declan that night, his mind racing with possibilities. By morning, he was vibrating with nervous energy, arriving at the small cafe 20 minutes before the scheduled meeting time. Emily Chen, a petite woman with kind eyes, studied him cautiously as she slid into the seat across from him. As Angie's former colleague and occasional lunch companion, she represented Declan's first real lead in weeks of searching. "I'm not sure I should be here," she said without preamble. "Angie was devastated when you left her. We all watched her try to put herself back together. Shame washed over Declan, but he pushed through it. I understand, and I don't blame you for being protective, but I need to find her. It's important." "Why now?" Emily challenged. "It's been 3 years, Declan. She's built a new life, a good life. Why disrupt that?" The question he'd been dreading. How much should he reveal? How much did Emily already know? I believe Angie may have had my children," he said carefully, watching for her reaction. "Triplets." Emily's expression remained impressively neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. Confirmation enough for Declan's racing heart. "They are mine, aren't they?" he pressed when she remained silent. "That's not for me to say," Emily finally replied. "And honestly, even if they were, what claim do you think you have after walking away? After marrying someone else within months?" Each word struck like a physical blow, but Declan absorbed them. He deserved this and worse. "I made a terrible mistake," he admitted, voice raw with emotion. "The worst mistake of my life. I can't undo it, but I need to at least try to make it right. Please, Emily, I'm not asking you to tell me everything. Just help me find her." Emily studied him for a long, uncomfortable moment, weighing his sincerity against her loyalty to Angie. "I won't give you her address," she finally said, "but I will tell you that her parents still live in the same house. Beyond that, it's up to you." It wasn't much, but it was more than Declan had managed in 2 weeks of searching. Thanking Emily profusely, he left the cafe with renewed purpose. The modest 2-story home where Angie's parents lived hadn't changed in the years since Declan had last visited. The same well-tended garden, the same blue shutters, the same ceramic. A frog decorating the front step that Angie had always threatened to accidentally break. His hands trembled slightly as he rang the doorbell, rehearsed speeches dying on his lips when Robert Saul opened the door. Angie's father had aged since Declan had last seen him, his hair grayer, the lines around his eyes deeper. Recognition, followed quickly by cold anger, transformed his expression. "You have a lot of nerve showing up here," Robert said, voice low and dangerous. "Please, Declan began. I know what you need, Robert cut him off, and you won't find it here. My daughter doesn't want to see you, and that's all you need to know. As he moved to close the door, Declan placed his palm against it, desperation overriding politeness. Are they mine? He asked bluntly. The triplets. Are they my children? Something flickered in Robert's eyes. The same telling micro-expression. Emily had shown. That's not your concern anymore. You made your choice 3 years ago. I saw them, Declan persisted, in the rain with Angie. 2 boys and a girl, exactly the right age. Please, Robert, I need to know. What you need, Robert replied coldly, is irrelevant to my daughter and her children. Now remove your hand from my door before I remove it for you. The threat was not idle. Robert Sewell had been a boxer in his youth and still maintained an imposing physique despite his age. But Declan stood his ground, driven by a desperation that surpassed physical fear. I'm not leaving, he said quietly. Not until I know the truth. What followed was a silent battle of wills, neither man willing to yield. Finally, a softer voice called from inside the house. Who is it, Robert? Angie's mother, Elizabeth, appeared. Behind her husband, her questioning expression hardening as she recognized their visitor. Unlike Robert's hot anger, Elizabeth's disapproval manifested as icy disdain. Declan Rice, she said, her tone suggesting she was naming something unpleasant found beneath a rock. What could possibly bring you to our door after all this time? He's asking about the triplets, Robert explained tightly. Elizabeth's gaze sharpened. Is that so? Convenient timing, given your very public marital troubles. News of his humiliation had clearly spread far. Declan flushed but held his ground. This has nothing to do with Cynthia. I saw Angie with the children 2 weeks ago. I need to know if they're mine. You gave up any right to know anything about my daughter when you abandoned her, Elizabeth stated flatly, when you rejected her because she supposedly couldn't give you children. The emphasis on supposedly was unmistakable. Confirmation slammed into Declan with the force of a physical blow. They were his children, his and Angie's, the family he had walked away from, believing it impossible. When? He asked, voice barely audible. When did she find out? Elizabeth exchanged a glance with her husband before answering reluctantly. The day after your divorce was finalized. The cruel irony of the timing staggered Declan. One day, if he had waited just one more day, everything might have been different. Please, he begged, dignity abandoned. I need to see her, to explain, to apologize, to meet my children, your children. Robert's voice rose dangerously. The ones you never knew existed because you were too busy marrying another woman? The ones Angie raised alone through a difficult pregnancy, through sleepless nights with 3 newborns, through every milestone and fever and first word. Each word was a knife to Declan's heart, but he accepted the pain as his due. I know I don't deserve another chance, he admitted, but they deserve to know their father, don't they? And I deserve the chance to be a father to them. That's for Angie to decide, Elizabeth said firmly. Not us, and certainly not you. Then let me talk to her, Declan pleaded. Just once. If she tells me to go, I'll respect her wishes. The lie was transparent. They all knew he would never truly walk away now that he knew the truth. But something in his desperate sincerity must have reached Elizabeth, for her expression softened marginally. I'll give her a message, she finally conceded. Whether she responds is entirely her choice. Relief weakened Declan's knees. Thank you so much. Don't thank me yet, Elizabeth warned. You broke her heart once. She may not give you the opportunity to do it again. As Declan turned to leave, Robert called after him. Rice. When Declan looked back, the older man's expression was grimly satisfied. They have your eyes, all 3 of them. Every time Angie looks at them, she has to see the man who walked away from her. The casual cruelty of the observation hit harder than any physical blow could have. Declan stumbled back to his car, the full weight of his actions crushing him. As never before, he had abandoned not just Angie, but 3 innocent children who carried his blood, his features, his legacy. As rain began to fall again, echoing the night he'd first glimpsed what he had lost, Declan made a solemn vow. If Angie gave him even the slightest chance, he would spend the rest of his life trying to make amends for his catastrophic mistake. And if she didn't, if she rejected him as he so richly deserved, he would find a way to be part of his children's lives regardless, even if from a distance, even if it took years of patient waiting. The family he had so desperately wanted had existed all along. And now that he knew, nothing would stop him from fighting to be part of it. Chapter 7. Stolen. Glimpses. A week passed with no word from Angie. A week of sleepless nights and distracted days for Declan. Work provided little distraction. Even the finalization of his divorce from Cynthia barely registered. Every ring of his phone sent his heart racing, only to crash again when the caller wasn't Angie. On the 8th day, when hope had begun to waver, Elizabeth Saul called. "She doesn't want to see you," Angie's mother said without preamble. "But she hasn't explicitly forbidden us from telling you where she might be found." The message was clear in its deliberate ambiguity. A mother torn between protecting her daughter and acknowledging the rights of a father to know his children. "Thank you," Declan breathed, fingers tightening around his phone. "I won't make you regret this." "Brookside Park," Elizabeth continued, ignoring his gratitude. "The children have swimming lessons at the community center there every Saturday. Morning at 10. That's all I'm going to say." The line went dead before Declan could respond. He stood frozen in his office, emotions warring within him, elation, anxiety, and bone-deep fear that he would somehow mess up this precarious opportunity. Saturday dawned bright and clear, a perfect early summer day. Declan arrived at Brookside, park an hour early, too nervous to risk being late. He parked his car at the far end of the lot, exchanging his usual luxury sedan for a nondescript rental, less likely to draw attention or be recognized if Angie was watching for him. The community center was easy to spot, a low brick building with cheerful banners announcing summer programs. Through large windows, Declan could see an indoor pool where other parents already waited with young children. His pulse quickened as he imagined seeing his own children in their midst. Unwilling to intrude on the lesson itself, he positioned himself on a bench with clear sightlines to the center's entrance, partially concealed by a large oak tree. The subterfuge made him uncomfortable, lurking like some kind of stalker when he should be boldly approaching as a father. But Angie's wishes had to be respected, at least for now. At precisely 9:53, a modest blue SUV pulled into the parking lot. Declan's heart nearly stopped as Angie emerged from the driver's seat, looking more beautiful than his tormented memory had managed to preserve. Motherhood had added a soft fullness to her figure that the simple sundress she wore accentuated perfectly. Her dark hair, shorter than he remembered, curled around her face in the gentle morning breeze. But it was the 3 small figures who tumbled from the back seat that completely stole Declan's breath. 2 identical boys with dark hair and a tiny girl with lighter curls, all moving with the chaotic energy of 3-year-olds anticipating something exciting. The boys wore matching swim trunks in different colors, while the little girl, Luna, if he remembered the names he'd overheard that rainy night, wore a pink swimsuit with ruffles. Declan's hands trembled as he drank in the sight of them. Though too distant to make out specific features, he could see they were beautiful, perfect children. His children, the family he'd abandoned before even knowing they existed. He watched, heart in his throat, as Angie herded the three toward the community center entrance, skillfully preventing one of the boys from wandering off while simultaneously adjusting the girl's ponytail. She moved with the practiced efficiency of a mother accustomed to managing multiple children, her patience evident even when the other boy stubbornly sat down and refused to move until she produced something from her bag that made him jump up with renewed enthusiasm. Fighting the overwhelming urge to approach them, Declan remained on his bench, a silent observer to the family life that should have included him. When they disappeared into the building, he let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, tears blurring his vision. They were real, not rain-soaked apparitions or desperate hallucinations, but living, breathing children. His blood, his legacy, and they had no idea he even existed. For 2 hours, Declan waited, alternating between anxious pacing and forced stillness on his chosen bench. When Angie finally emerged with 3 damp-haired children, he tensed, prepared for another brief, distant glimpse before they drove away. Instead, the small family headed toward the playground adjacent to the community center. Unexpected opportunity surged through Declan as he realized he might get closer, might hear their voices, might learn something of their personalities. Careful to maintain distance, he relocated to another bench with a view of the playground, positioning an open newspaper as further camouflage. From here, he could observe in greater detail, could hear snippets of conversation carried on the summer breeze. "Higher, Mommy, higher!" the little girl demanded as Angie pushed her on the swings, her high voice clear and commanding. Even in those 3 words, Declan recognized the natural authority that had served him well in boardrooms. "Luna, patience," Angie replied with fond exasperation. "Your brothers need turns too." The boys had divided their attention, one methodically climbing to the highest point of the play structure, while the other arranged small pebbles in precise patterns at its base. Declan strained to hear their names, to match identities to the small figures who shared his DNA. "Lucas, be careful up there," Angie called to the climber, who waved down at her with casual confidence. "Logan, what are you building, sweetie?" Names attached to faces now. Lucas, the adventurer, Logan, the builder, and Luna, the little princess on her swing throne. Declan committed every detail to memory, building mental profiles of the children he longed to know. The peaceful scene shattered when Luna suddenly tumbled from her swing, landing hard on her knees with a cry that pierced Declan's heart. Before he could think, he was half risen from his bench, instinct driving him to comfort his injured child. Angie reached her first, of course, gathering the sobbing girl into gentle arms. "Shh, it's okay, my brave girl. Let Mommy see." Declan sank back down, knuckles white as he gripped the bench edge, watching Angie tenderly examine scraped knees. With efficient movements, she produced antiseptic wipes and colorful bandages from her seemingly magical bag, all while murmuring reassurances that gradually calmed Luna's tears. "You're so brave," Angie praised, pressing a kiss to her daughter's forehead. "Braver than Daddy, even." The casual reference froze Declan in place. Daddy, they knew of him then, spoke of him. But what did they know? What story had Angie told to explain his absence? His questions multiplied as he observed the next hour of their play. How Lucas looked up when tall men passed by. How Logan seemed to hold himself apart sometimes. How Luna occasionally glanced around as if searching for someone specific. Did they wonder about him, miss him, hate him? When Angie finally gathered her brood for departure, Declan remained motionless, fighting the desperate urge to approach. It wasn't time yet. He hadn't earned the right. Instead, he followed their SUV at a careful distance, needing to know where. They lived to solidify the reality of their existence in his mind. The modest but well-maintained house in a family-friendly neighborhood seemed perfectly suited to Angie, practical, welcoming, unpretentious. For weeks, Declan lived for these stolen glimpses, restructuring multi-million-dollar business deals around the Triplets schedule. His obsession grew with each sighting, swimming lessons where Luna fearlessly plunged underwater while her brothers hesitated, story time where Logan whispered facts about dinosaurs that contradicted the librarians, reading, playground visits where Lucas conquered the highest climbing frame with reckless determination. He catalogued precious details like a starving man hoarding crumbs. Luna sang constantly, inventing melodies about everything she saw. Logan arranged his food in geometric patterns before eating. Lucas spoke rarely, but with startling insight when he did. All three possessed an uncanny awareness of each other's emotions, a private language of glances and gestures that needed no words. Most devastating were intimate moments between Angie and the children, how she'd press her forehead against theirs, while listening to their problems, the particular way she'd kiss their palms and fold their fingers over it, keeping kisses safe for later, how she'd whisper, "brave heart," before any challenge they faced. In these unguarded moments, Declan glimpsed the extraordinary mother she'd become without him. Each observation twisted the knife deeper. He'd missed Luna's first steps, taken at 10 months while her brothers were still crawling. He hadn't heard Logan's first word, "why," perfectly capturing his analytical nature. He'd been absent when Lucas had his first asthma attack. Angie, carrying all three children to the emergency room alone in the middle of the night. The debt of these moments accumulated like a mountain he could never scale. On a particularly beautiful evening in late July, Declan watched from his usual distance as Angie spread a picnic blanket under a sprawling oak tree in the park. The triplets tumbled around her like puppies while she produced sandwiches cut into shapes that delighted them. "Triangle for Lucas," she announced, handing it to the more active boy. "Square for Logan." The methodical one accepted with a serious nod. "And your heart for my Luna love." "Why is mine a heart?" Luna asked, examining her sandwich with critical interest. "Because you have a big piece of my heart," Angie replied, tapping her daughter's chest gently. "Do I have a piece of Daddy's heart too?" Luna asked innocently, the question carrying clearly to where Declan sat frozen. A shadow passed over Angie's face, so brief Declan might have imagined it had he not known her expressions so well once. "Yes," she said after a moment's hesitation. "Your daddy would love you very much if he knew you." The simple statement, spoken without bitterness despite every reason for it, broke something in Declan. He waited until they had packed up their picnic and headed home before making his decision. That night, as rain began to fall, a gentle summer shower that brought back memories of the night he'd first seen them, Declan drove to Angie's house. The windows glowed with warm light, silhouettes moving inside, suggesting bedtime routines in progress. For long minutes, he sat in his car, courage failing him. What right did he have to disrupt the life Angie had carefully constructed? What claim could he make on children who had never known him? Yet the need to acknowledge them, to be acknowledged by them, overwhelmed his doubts. From his briefcase, he withdrew an envelope containing 3 months' worth of his salary, not as payment, never that, but as a token of support, too long withheld. On a note card, he wrote in careful handwriting, "I know about our children. Please, let me meet them. I still love you." Simple, direct, utterly inadequate. The rain intensified as Declan approached Angie's front door, soaking through his expensive suit. Appropriate, he thought grimly, that he should arrive drenched just as he had the night of his revelation. Placing the envelope on the doorstep, sheltered from rain by the small porch overhang, Declan rang the bell before retreating quickly to his car. Through the windshield, he watched the door open, saw Angie's silhouette as she discovered his offering. Even from a distance, he could see how she froze, how her hand trembled as she opened the envelope, how she clutched the doorframe. For support upon reading his note, For one wild moment, he thought she might look up, might search the darkness for him. Instead, she gathered the envelope tightly against her chest and closed the door with deliberate finality. That night, Declan dreamed of three small figures reaching for him across an ever-widening chasm, their faces blurring as they receded into distance. He woke gasping, sheets twisted around him, the phantom sensation of tiny hands still lingering on his skin. His phone chimed with a text message from an unknown number. "Stop following us, stop watching us, leave us alone." The direct acknowledgement, though hostile, sent a surge of hope through Declan. She had his number. She had contacted him, if only to push him away. "Please, Angie," he texted back immediately. "Just one meeting. They're my children too." Hours passed with no response, stretching his nerves to breaking point. When his phone finally chimed again near dawn, he lunged for it with desperate hands. "They stopped being your children when you walked away from their mother, when you married another woman weeks after discarding me, when you weren't there for midnight feedings and colic and first steps." Each accusation landed like a physical blow, all the more devastating for their undeniable truth. Still, Declan persisted. The reply, when it finally came, offered the smallest sliver of hope. "Anything. Prove it." Two simple words that promised a chance, however slim. Declan seized it with both hands. "Name your terms. Anything you ask." What followed was silence. 3 days of agonizing silence, during which Declan respected her boundaries, ceasing his covert observations while living on the knife edge of anticipation. On the 4th day, while reviewing acquisition proposals in his office, Declan's phone rang, with that same unknown number. His hand shook so badly he nearly dropped it in his haste to answer. "Angie?" he breathed, scarcely daring to hope. "Cafe Marino," she said without greeting, her voice sending shivers of recognition through him despite the years. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Come alone." "I'll be there," he promised. "Thank you, Angie. Thank you for—" The line went dead before he could finish, but it didn't matter. She had agreed to meet him. After 3 years of separation, after his unforgivable abandonment, after her justified anger, she was willing to talk. It was more than he deserved, and infinitely less than he wanted. But it was a beginning, and for now, that would have to be enough. Chapter 8. Confrontation and Conditions. Cafe Marino bustled with mid-morning patrons, the air rich with espresso and freshly baked pastries. Declan arrived 30 minutes early, selecting a corner table that offered privacy while allowing him to watch the door. Each time it opened, his heart lurched painfully in his chest. At precisely 10 o'clock she appeared. Angie stood framed in the doorway, sunlight catching in her dark hair, her simple blue dress emphasizing curves motherhood had bestowed. For a moment, seeing her fully and up close for the first time in 3 years, Declan couldn't breathe. She was more beautiful than his tormented memory had preserved. A woman now, with quiet confidence that had replaced the girl he'd married. When her eyes found his across the crowded cafe, electricity arced between them, that inexplicable connection that neither time nor betrayal had managed to sever. Declan rose on unsteady legs as she approached, fighting the overwhelming urge to pull her into his arms. "Angie," he breathed, her name a prayer on his lips. "Declan." Her voice was cool, controlled, revealing nothing of the emotions that flickered in her eyes. She sat, without waiting for him to hold her chair, establishing boundaries with the simple gesture. Up close, he could see faint shadows beneath her eyes, the only visible evidence of the strain his reappearance had caused. Her hands, once adorned with his ring, now bore tiny scars and calluses, badges of motherhood earned in his absence. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, struggling to keep his voice steady. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't, she admitted, ordering coffee from a hovering waitress without looking at the menu. Her familiar preference hadn't changed. Latte with an extra shot, no sugar. When the waitress departed, silence stretched between them, 3 years of unspoken words creating an almost tangible barrier. Declan studied her face hungrily, cataloguing changes. The slight crease between her brows that hadn't been there before, the more pronounced curve of her cheekbones, the guarded expression that had replaced open affection. "They're beautiful," he finally said, unable to contain the words any longer. "Our children, they're perfect." Something flashed in Angie's eyes, pain or pride or both. "You've been watching us for weeks." "I needed to see them," Declan admitted, not bothering to deny it. "To know them, even from a distance." "They're not yours to know," she countered, voice sharpening. "You gave up that right." "I didn't know you were pregnant," he said softly. If you had, what?" Angie interrupted, leaning forward slightly. "You wouldn't have left me, wouldn't have married another woman barely 2 months later, wouldn't have moved on with your life as if 5 years together meant nothing?" Each accusation struck with devastating accuracy. Declan accepted the blows, knowing he deserved them. "And worse, I made a terrible mistake," he acknowledged, voice rough with emotion. "The worst mistake of my life. There's nothing I can say to justify it, nothing I can do to undo it. But please believe that if I had known about the pregnancy, I never would have left." "But you did leave," Angie pointed out, her composure slipping slightly. "Because I supposedly couldn't give you children. Because your precious family legacy meant more than our marriage." The coffee arrived, creating a momentary reprieve from the intensity between them. Angie wrapped her fingers around her mug, the simple gesture so achingly familiar it made Declan's chest hurt. "When did you find out?" he asked quietly. "About the pregnancy." "The day after our divorce was finalized," she replied, a bitter smile touching her lips. "Ironic timing, wouldn't you say? I was going to call you, but then I saw the photos in the society pages, you and Cynthia Laurie at some charity gala, her hand possessively on your arm, your wedding announcement already circulating." Shame washed over him in a suffocating wave. "I was trying to forget you," he admitted. "It didn't work." "Clearly," Angie said dryly, gesturing to his presence across from her, "your spectacular public divorce made quite the headlines. Is that why you're here, Declan? Because your second marriage failed, and suddenly you remembered the wife you discarded?" "No," he said firmly, meeting her eyes. "I'm here because I saw my children playing in the rain with their mother, and it shattered everything I thought I knew. I'm here because they deserve a father, and I deserve the chance to be that for them." "Deserve?" Angie's eyebrows rose. "You think this is about what you deserve?" "What they deserve, then," Declan amended quickly. "Logan, Lucas, and Luna deserve to know their father, don't they?" Hearing their names from his lips visibly startled Angie. Her fingers tightened around her mug, knuckles whitening. "You know their names." "I've learned what I could from a distance," he acknowledged. "Lucas is the adventurer, always climbing. Logan is methodical, builds things. And Luna," his voice softened involuntarily, "Luna has my eyes and asks about her daddy." Moisture gathered in Angie's eyes before she blinked it away. "You have no idea what it's been like," she said quietly, "carrying 3 babies alone, giving birth without you there, explaining to curious 3-year-olds why other children have daddies and they don't." "Then let me make it right," Declan pleaded, resisting the urge to reach for her hand. "Let me be part of their lives." "It's not that simple, and you know it," Angie said, regaining her composure. "You can't just appear suddenly and disrupt the life we've built." "Tell me what to do," he said, desperation edging his voice. "Anything, Angie, I'll do anything." For a long moment she studied him, weighing his sincerity against years of hurt. Finally she straightened, decision evident in her posture. "4 conditions," she said, her tone shifting from emotional to pragmatic. Non-negotiable. If you want any chance of being in their lives, you'll meet all four. Hope surged through Declan, fierce and painful. Name them. First, Angie began, ticking off on her fingers, you will attend therapy. Intensive twice-weekly sessions with a specialist I choose, to understand why you abandoned our marriage and to ensure you won't damage our children the way you damaged me. Declan nodded immediately. Done. Second, you will volunteer for 6 months at the fertility support center where I found help after our divorce. You'll work with couples experiencing what we did, so you understand exactly what you threw away. Though the prospect was daunting, Declan didn't hesitate. Agreed. Third, she continued, her gaze hardening, you will legally sign half your personal fortune, not company shares, but liquid assets, into irrevocable trust funds for the children. Prove this isn't about your precious rice legacy. The request was substantial but unsurprising. I'll have the papers drawn up this week. And fourth, Angie concluded, her voice softening slightly, you will earn my trust again. 6 months of letters, Declan. 1 every day. No phone calls, no visits, no chance encounters at the park. Just words on paper, proving you understand what you did and why you want to be in their lives. Of all the conditions, this seemed simultaneously the easiest and most difficult. Letters? He repeated, confused by the specific request. You were always most honest in writing, she explained. I need to know who you really are now, not who you pretend to be in person. I need to trust you won't hurt them like you hurt me. The full weight of her conditions pressed on Declan, months of separation still ahead before he could meet his children. Rigorous psychological examination, financial commitment, and the most difficult task of all, earning back Angie's shattered trust. 6 months is a long time, he said quietly. They're growing so quickly. They've managed 3 years without you, Angie replied with gentle brutality. 6 more months won't make a difference. Before he could respond, she rose from her chair, their coffee barely touched. Take it or leave it, Declan. Those are my terms. Without conscious thought, Declan captured her wrist as she turned to leave. The instant their skin connected, electric awareness shot through him like a current. Beneath his fingers, her pulse jumped erratically. 3 years hadn't diminished their physical chemistry. If anything, separation had intensified it. This briefest contact sending heat radiating through his body, awakening sensory memories he'd suppressed for survival. The particular texture of her skin, the hidden spot behind her ear that made her gasp when kissed, the way she'd arch beneath him, whispering demands that still haunted his dreams. For one suspended moment, they remained frozen in this connection, her dilated pupils betraying that she felt it too. This visceral recognition that transcended hurt and betrayal. Her gaze dropped briefly to his mouth, a gesture so familiar, it physically ached. Then Angie pulled away, but not before Declan glimpsed naked vulnerability beneath her carefully constructed armor. I accept all your conditions, he said, voice rough with emotion. Every single one. She nodded once, sharply, as if she'd expected nothing less. At the edge of the table, she hesitated, adding over her shoulder, make the letters count, Declan. Pour everything into them. They're your only path back to us. Her perfume lingered after she'd gone. The same jasmine scent she'd worn throughout their marriage, another deliberate reminder of what he'd thrown away. With that, she walked away, leaving behind only the lingering scent of her perfume and the imprint of her fingers against his skin, a ghost of connection that would have to sustain him through the months of separation ahead. Chapter 9. Redemption through letters. June 15th. Dearest Angie, this first letter feels inadequate before I've even begun. How do I compress 3 years of regret into words on paper? How do I explain the inexplicable, my decision to walk away from the only woman I've ever truly loved? Dr. Levine, the therapist you chose, who is as formidable and insightful as I imagine you intended, asked me today why I left. The answer I gave sounded hollow even to my own ears. Family expectations, pressure from my father, the Rice legacy. She challenged me to dig deeper, to find the truth beneath these convenient excuses. The truth, I think, is fear, not of living without children, but of loving someone so completely that their pain became my own. Watching you suffer through each failed treatment, each negative test, broke something in me. Rather than face that pain together, I convinced myself I could escape it by leaving. How spectacularly wrong I was. I'll write again tomorrow. These letters are my lifeline to you, to our children, to the family I hope we might somehow become. Still yours, despite everything. Declan. Angie folded the letter carefully, sliding it back into its envelope with trembling fingers. She hadn't expected such raw honesty so quickly, hadn't expected to feel anything beyond justified anger, yet something in Declan's words, the vulnerable admission of fear rather than the convenient blame of family obligation, struck a chord she'd thought, long silenced. Determined not to be swayed by a single moment of candor, she placed the letter in an empty shoebox, telling herself it was merely for documentation. July 2nd. Angie. Today at the fertility center, I met a couple so reminiscent of us that I nearly had to excuse myself. The woman had your determined optimism despite repeated disappointments. The man wore the same mask of supportive strength that I once wore, while silently calculating costs and statistics behind it. I recognized in him what I couldn't see in myself 3 years ago, how fear masquerades as practicality, how easily love becomes conditional when tested by circumstances beyond control. When he mentioned considering divorce for both their sakes, I shared our story. Not the fairy tale beginning or the bitter end, but the middle, the part where I failed. Us by making your pain about my disappointment rather than supporting you through it. I told him what I lost through my cowardice, not just you, but 3 miraculous children I still haven't met. He stayed. Whether temporarily or permanently, I don't know, but he left holding his wife's hand instead of divorce papers. One small redemption, though it doesn't begin to balance my ledger. Thinking of you always, Declan. The shoebox acquired a second letter, then a third. By August, Angie needed a larger container, though she still maintained the fiction that she was merely documenting Declan's effort, not eagerly anticipating each day's delivery. August 18th. My Angie, forgive the presumption. 2 months of therapy have stripped away the convenient narratives I built around our divorce. Dr. Levine doesn't allow easy answers or self-serving justifications. Yesterday, she asked if I ever truly saw you during our marriage. Saw you, not what you could give me. The question haunted me all night. I remembered how you'd sit at our kitchen counter reading medical journals with such intensity, glasses perched on your nose, completely absorbed. How your whole face would light up explaining some new research discovery. I realized I never once asked why medicine fascinated you so deeply. What drew you to healing others? I saw what you could be for me. Wife, potential mother, suitable. Partner for a Rice? But did I truly see Angie Soul, the woman whose passion for helping others defined her long before she met me? In bed last night, I remembered how you felt sleeping beside me, the perfect weight of your head on my chest, your leg thrown over mine, the soft sounds you made dreaming, physical memories so vivid they left me aching for what I threw away. I dream of our children now too, 3 small faces with features I can almost make out, calling for me across a distance I created. I wake reaching for them, for you finding only empty space. Missing you in ways I have no right to express. Declan. As summer yielded to autumn, the letters evolved. Initial apologies and retrospection gave way to glimpses of Declan's daily life. Therapy breakthroughs, volunteer experiences, quiet evenings alone with thoughts of what might have been. Angie found herself looking forward to these intimate windows into his transformation, sometimes reading passages multiple times before carefully adding each letter to her growing collection. September 30th. My Angie. 4 months of letters, yet I've avoided confronting my greatest betrayal, remarrying so quickly after leaving you. No justification exists, though I tried creating many. The truth, marrying Cinzia was a desperate attempt to prove I hadn't destroyed my life by leaving you. I failed spectacularly. In our most intimate moments, I betrayed her too. Your name nearly escaped my lips countless times as I closed my eyes, pretending it was your body beneath mine. Even in darkness, my hands recognized the differences. Her skin too soft where yours had that perfect texture that raised goosebumps under my touch. Her responses calculated where yours were beautifully unrestrained. Do you remember that weekend? In the mountains, how we never left our cabin, discovering each other's bodies as if they contained all the secrets of the universe. I remember everything. The constellation of freckles across your left shoulder blade that I traced with my tongue. The way you'd grip the headboard when pleasure overwhelmed you, knuckles white, back arched. How you'd whisper exactly what you wanted in explicit detail that contrasted so beautifully with your public reserve. I remember the particular taste of your skin after making love. Salt and sweetness mingled with something uniquely yours that I've never found elsewhere. The specific timbre of your voice when you'd cry my name at the height of passion. The way you'd laugh breathlessly afterward, curling your body against mine as if we could somehow occupy the same space. Is this too forward? Perhaps. But honesty demands I confess that my body remembers yours with painful clarity. Not just the physical pleasure, unmatched as it was, but that moment of perfect unity when nothing existed beyond us. Still burning for you, Declan Angie's. Hands trembled violently, heat flooding her body at his explicit remembrances. She pressed the letter against her chest, heart racing as dormant sensations awakened. She'd convinced herself their physical connection had died with his betrayal, yet the liquid warmth pooling in her core proved otherwise. That night, she surrendered to memories long suppressed, his mouth on her inner thigh, the perfect pressure of his fingers finding that spot that made her shatter, his weight anchoring her when pleasure threatened to sweep her away. Sleep came fitfully, dreams so vivid she woke tangled in sheets, body aching for a touch she'd denied herself for 3 long years. October 15th. Angie. Today I signed the final trust documents, transferring half my personal wealth to our children. The lawyer seemed perplexed by my insistence on irrevocable terms that prevent me from ever reclaiming these funds, even if I never meet them. I couldn't explain that this isn't about money, but proof, tangible evidence that I accept these children, unconditionally, without any claim of ownership or control. Dr. Levine says I'm making progress, though the work is far from complete. My father's expectations nearly destroyed what should have been my priority. Loving you properly, building a life based on what we wanted, rather than what generations of rice men demanded. Yesterday at the fertility center, a couple announced their decision to adopt. The joy on their faces as they shared their plans reminded me of what I once dismissed so casually. That family is created through love, not merely DNA. How could I have been so blind? I saw Luna in a dream last night. So vividly it felt like visitation rather than imagination. She had your smile but my eyes, and she asked why I'd been gone so long. I woke with tears on my face, and your name on my lips. 2 more months of letters, of separation, of waiting. It feels both interminable and insufficient for the magnitude of what I hope to repair. Yours, always. Declan. By November, Angie had stopped pretending the letters were merely documentation. She carried the day's delivery with her, reading and rereading during quiet moments. The triplets noticed her anticipation of the mail's arrival, asking innocent questions about the envelopes that made her heart race. "Is that from our daddy?" Luna asked one afternoon, studying Angie's face with those piercing blue eyes so like Declan's. "Why do you think that?" Angie countered gently, surprised by her daughter's perception. Luna shrugged with preternatural confidence. "You smile different when you read them, like in the pictures with Daddy." Out of the mouths of babes, Angie thought, realizing her careful compartmentalization wasn't as successful as she'd believed. November 25th. My dearest Angie, 5 months of letters, of therapy, of volunteer work that has transformed my perspective on what truly matters. 5 months of dreaming of our children, of you, of the family we could be. If you find it in your heart to give me a second chance, I know I don't deserve. Dr. Levine asked today what I would say if I could speak to my former self, the man who walked away from you. I said I would grab him by the shoulders and shake him until he understood what he was throwing away. I would tell him that children aren't possessions or achievements, but miraculous gifts, however they come into your life. I would tell him that loving you, truly loving you, not the idea of you or what you could provide, was the only legacy that mattered. The trust funds are established. The therapy continues twice weekly. My volunteer commitment has extended beyond your requirements because the work has become meaningful beyond obligation. But these letters, Angie, these daily confessions and reflections, have been my true salvation. Through them, I've rediscovered not just who I was with you, but who I might yet become if given the chance to love you and our children as you all deserve. 1 more month separates me from the possibility of meeting Logan, Lucas, and Luna. 1 more month of waiting, hoping, dreaming of small faces that share our features and hearts that I hope might someday have space for me. Eternally yours. Declan. As December arrived, bringing holiday decorations and excited children anticipating Christmas, Angie faced the looming decision she'd postponed throughout the 6 months of letters. Declan had fulfilled every condition she'd set: therapy, volunteering, financial commitment, and daily correspondence that revealed a man transformed by regret and hope. The final letter arrived on a snowy evening, the envelope slightly thicker than usual. Angie opened it with trembling fingers after the triplets were asleep, curled in her favorite reading chair beside the Christmas tree. December 15th. My beloved Angie. 6 months. 183 letters, thousands of words attempting to bridge the chasm I created between us. Has it been enough? I cannot know, can only hope. Today, I completed my formal volunteer commitment at the fertility center, though I'll continue working there regardless of your decision about our future. The director asked what brought me there initially. For the first time, I shared our complete story without shame or evasion. My failure, my loss, my hope for redemption. Dr. Levine says I've made significant progress, but that real healing can only come through action, not words. She's right, of course. These letters have been a lifeline for me, but they remain one-sided. My perspective, my journey, my hopes. What I need now, what our children need, is your decision. Have I earned the right to meet them? to begin the long process of becoming the father they deserve, to attempt, though I scarcely dare hope for it, to rebuild something with you? The enclosed photograph was taken on our second anniversary. You, asleep against my chest, my arms around you, both of us peaceful in that perfect connection we once shared. I've carried it with me every day since I left, a talisman of what I lost through my own folly. 6 months ago, you said my letters were my only chance. I've poured everything into them, every regret, every hope, every truth I've discovered about myself and what I truly want. Now I wait, respecting your right to decide our future. Christmas approaches, their 4th Christmas, which I've missed along with all the others before it. Whether I'm permitted to share their 5th depends entirely on you, as it should. With eternal love and hope. Declan. Angie stared at the photograph, her younger self wrapped in Declan's protective embrace, both of them radiating contentment. Neither had fully appreciated at the time. Tears slipped down her cheeks as 6 months of carefully controlled emotions finally broke free. Late that night, after hours of reflection and rereading select letters, Angie made her decision. With hands that shook slightly, she composed a simple response, the first direct communication she'd initiated since establishing his conditions. Declan. The children's birthday party is next Saturday, 2 p.m. They'll be 4. It seems an appropriate time for them to meet their father. Angie. She added her address, though she suspected he already knew it, then sealed the envelope before she could reconsider. Tomorrow she would mail it, setting in motion the next chapter of their complicated story. For tonight, she allowed herself to remember, to hope, and perhaps, though she wasn't ready to admit it yet, to begin forgiving. Chapter 10. Coming Home. Snow dusted Angie's garden as she adjusted the birthday decorations. Inside, 3 excited 4-year-olds waited impatiently for cake and presents, unaware their world would change today. Smoothing her emerald dress, the color Declan once said made her eyes irresistible, Angie drew a steadying breath. Her mother squeezed her shoulder reassuringly just as the doorbell rang. "I'll get it," her mother offered, recognizing Angie's sudden nervousness. When Angie descended the stairs moments later, Declan stood in her foyer, snowflakes melting on his coat, a large gift in his arms. Their eyes locked, years apart, collapsing into a single electric moment of recognition. "You came early," she managed. "Couldn't wait any longer," he admitted. Vulnerability replacing the corporate mask he'd worn in their final days together. "The children don't know yet," she explained, leading him toward the playroom. "I thought we should tell them together." Before they entered, Declan caught her hand. The contact sent electricity through her she couldn't deny. "These past 6 months changed me completely," he said softly. "I need you to know that." "We'll see," she replied, neither accepting nor rejecting his transformation. When they entered the playroom, 3 heads turned simultaneously. Lucas immediately retreated to his grandmother's side, naturally cautious. Logan stared with analytical curiosity. But Luna, brave, intuitive Luna, stopped mid-play, her blue eyes widening with recognition. "Are you my daddy?" she asked, directly, stunning both adults with her perception. Declan knelt slowly, emotion evident in his trembling hands. "Yes, Luna, I'm your daddy." The little girl approached carefully, reaching to touch his face as if confirming he was real. "You were gone a very long time." "Too long," he agreed, a tear escaping. "I got lost, but I found my way back." This simple explanation satisfied Luna, who immediately invited him to her tea party. Logan soon approached with dinosaur figures, attesting Declan with questions about favorites. Only Lucas remained distant, watching carefully from across the room. "He needs time," Angie whispered, and Declan nodded in understanding. The birthday celebration progressed with surreal joy, Declan lighting candles, singing alongside everyone, watching with wonder as three small faces blew out flames representing years he'd missed. His gift, personalized teddy bears for each child, earned delighted squeals, and, most precious of all, a small smile from Lucas. As evening fell, the children insisted Declan participate in bedtime routines. Watching him navigate toothbrushing negotiations and story time with natural ease, Angie glimpsed the father he should have been all along. "They're incredible," Declan whispered after the children finally succumbed to sleep. They stood in the hallway outside the triplets' room, close enough to feel each other's warmth. "You've done an amazing job, Angie." Before she could respond, thunder crashed overhead. Seconds later, tiny footsteps pattered toward them. "Mummy, the sky's angry!" Luna cried, halting when she saw Declan still there. He crouched to her level. "The sky's just playing drums, princess. Nothing to be afraid of." Luna considered this before reaching her arms toward him, the ultimate gesture of childish trust. Without hesitation, Declan lifted her against his chest. "Will you stay until the storm stops?" she asked, small fingers clutching his shirt. Over their daughter's head, Declan's eyes met Angie's, the question extending beyond the immediate situation. "If your mother says it's okay," he replied carefully, heart constricting at the sight. Of them together, a connection formed instantly despite years of absence. Angie nodded. "He can stay." Soon all three children, awakened by thunder, gathered in the living room. Blankets and pillows transformed the floor into a cozy nest as Declan told improvised stories about brave children unafraid of storms. As the last little eyelids closed in sleep, Declan and Angie found themselves sitting close together, their sleeping children between them, like bridges connecting separate shores. "This," Declan whispered, gesturing to the peaceful tableau, "this is everything I never knew I needed until I lost it." Something broke within Angie at his words, the final barrier protecting her heart. Without analyzing her actions, she reached across the sleeping children, her fingers finding his. Declan's breath caught audibly, his hand tightening around hers with reverent care. When she didn't pull away, he slowly raised their joined hands to his lips, pressing a kiss against her knuckles. The simple gesture unleashed a flood of sensory memory. His scent, the texture of his skin, the way their bodies had once moved in perfect harmony. Electricity sparked between them, their physical connection undiminished by time and pain. "We have so much to rebuild," she whispered, tears gathering. "Day by day," he promised, echoing her words from months before. "I'll wait however long it takes." Outside, the storm gentled to soft rain, washing clean their painful past. Whatever tomorrow might bring, tonight they were whole again. Two hearts finding their way back to each other through the miracle of three small lives who carried the best of them both.